Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. This interview is being tape recorded. Today it's my intention to interview Karen Nicolaou. Now, Karen has done a number of different, very interesting things. She doesn't think they're interesting, and when she sent me the list, she said, "Oh, these are interesting enough." They are absolutely fantastic. This is X Job Downloaded, and we are going to take this next hour or so to find out all about Karen. Karen, thank you so much for hosting me here today.
Welcome.
And thank you for giving me the equipment to do it, because I'd made a bit of a mess of it, to be fair, and you directed me properly. It was like being at home, to be honest with you. Karen, what's your background?
I'll try and do it briefly.
No. Listen, we don't do brief.
Don't do brief. Right. Okay. So I was born to a Chinese man from a tiny village in China who came to the UK in the 50s, I think it was, early 50s, because England needed workforce.
Yeah.
So he came over with his brother. He's a kung fu master. And because of the amount of triad that are very active or were active in Chinatown, he decided not to do that. And he got a job in a restaurant. He was a very good chef. So he brought his brother over, and they all came over, and this was the 50s, and he ended up settling in Cheltenham. He was a chef in Chinatown in London for a long time. He met my mother, whose descent we're unsure of. She's not alive. She died very early, but Greek predominantly.
Right.
They had a very, very dysfunctional marriage, as you can imagine. Didn't speak the language very well. They were both quite good-looking people, and we can only ever put our finger on that. We really can. We look at them and think, how? But between them, they had 6 children. My father had already been betrothed to somebody in China, and he'd got 3 sons when he was 16, so they were tiny little boys. Wow. And he came to England. And he marries my mother, and he has another 5 children, which are us. And then when I was about 4, no, a little bit older, I was 5, they parted company.
Right.
And initially we were with my mother, and my father went back to Hong Kong, and he was there for a little while. My mother, bless her soul, I say that, I don't really know her that well, was very dysfunctional. When I think about it now, I think she may have had bipolar or something like that.
Yeah.
Decided to just up and leave one day, and all 5 of us just stayed in the home.
Wow. And what were the age ranges at that point?
I was 6, I think. My memories are about that age, but my older sister was about 13. She was probably about 11 or 12.
Right.
So she hid us, because my mum just disappeared. My dad didn't know about it. My mum just disappeared. She'd turn up every now and then to make sure there was food in the house, and then she'd disappear again. So as a subsequent of her behaviour and my older sister trying to hide us, because we're talking 70s now, late 60s if you like, my older sister talks about it now, and she'll say, "I didn't want social services to take us."
No.
So she hid us. So if you imagine an 11, 12-year-old.
Wow.
So she looks after us, and we're very, very close to each other, even now.
Even now, yeah.
And I think it's because we formed this bond where we looked after each other. So eventually social services did turn up, because she was gone for about 2 weeks. Bearing in mind the youngest was probably about 3. Contacted my father, who had no idea what was going on, and as a result of that behaviour, he took us, and he took all of us.
And where were you living then? What part of the country?
I was actually born in Colchester.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, so he lived in Cheltenham, so he turned up, and at the time they said to him, "You can't be a single man and look after 5 children." Or 3, because 2 of them were a bit older and they wanted to stay put. So he said, "I'll go back to China and find a wife then." And that's exactly what he did. So he went back to China, found an arranged marriage with a Chinese lady who didn't speak a word of English, came back. He had a restaurant by then, And he'd bought a restaurant and he'd set it up because in Cheltenham there were probably about 5 or 6 Chinese takeaways, all belonging to relatives of mine, my dad, his brother, his sister, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then my dad came along and found out what was happening. He'd gone and got this wife, that married her, came back to England, back into the restaurant, and he turned up in Colchester, picked us all up, and off we went. And that's where we stayed.
Incredible.
So we grew up in a restaurant, in a Chinese culture. We learnt the language because there was no other way to communicate with his wife. So while we were at home, it was really strange because we never used knife and fork until we went to school. We never did anything
Western.
English, if you like, until we went to school. My dad's English was good, but not it was broken.
Yeah.
So we communicated with him in a dialect called Hakka, which is very used in the new territories of Hong Kong.
Right.
It's dying a little bit now because it's not used so much, but Cantonese and Mandarin. But my father spoke all dialects. So.
Right.
And he was a very proud man, have to say. So we always say that we were brought up by a man.
Yeah.
Hence, I think I got my character from there because
Right.
he brought us up to think, you don't take any crap from anyone.
No.
He was a master of Kung Fu. Very well known in Hong Kong for being the master of that particular.
Yeah.
And he brought us up and he used to say, and I remember as a kid, because I was quite shy as a kid, believe it or not, and I was small. I was prematurely born, so I was 3 pounds, and so I never grew very much until I left school, and all my sisters towered over me, and they were real hefty, as in, don't take any crap from anyone. And I remember a girl having me up against the wall in a classroom once with a metre ruler on my chin, and I'm standing there, and she's calling me names, and my younger sister walks past the classroom, double takes, and comes in and just whops her backside. And I was quite a wimp then. I was just afraid.
Oh,
I was
changed.
very quiet. I know. And I don't remember the transition, but I was very scared of things. And my father was pat her on the back. She was good. She'd come home every day and say, "Got any bruises?" He'd say to her, because she's getting fights all the time. And he used to say to us, "You don't start fights, but what you do is you don't let anyone hit you."
Yeah.
Because we grew up being called names. So we go to school and we go through school and he is very strict. We're girls. I've got
Because
a brother.
of your Chinese heritage?
Yeah. We're not allowed out. So we come home from school. We run the restaurant with him. We've all got our chores. And that's it. We don't go to the first nightclub I ever went to was with my husband.
Wow.
And I was 19. So, we weren't allowed out of our house, as in you don't have boyfriends. You don't bring boyfriends home to meet your father unless you're marrying him.
Yeah.
And you were never going to meet anyone anyway. Brother was different. My father used to say to my brother, "Do what we want, basically, just be careful," and that was it.
Yeah.
But it was normal to us. And I read a book recently called Chinglish, and it's to do with, I could have read my life in that book because it was Chinese children being brought up in England in restaurants.
Right.
And how we all felt about it.
I'm going to read that book.
It is funny as
Is
hell.
it?
Yeah, I relate to every word she says. Anyway, so, my friends go, "You come out tonight?" "No, I've got to go to the restaurant and peel some onions." That was our norm.
Yeah, of course.
On the other hand, he was strong. He provided for us. In those days, we sort of had a bit of money because he had a restaurant. So
Yeah.
me and my sister, we joke about it now, but we wanted a new coat for school and he only ever bought his things from Marks and Spencer's. We wanted a bloody parka with fur around it, and we get this 100 quid cashmere coat. And it's like, oh, God. But it's smart, it's quality.
Yeah.
So we did see our mother briefly, and in the summer holidays, we would come back to Colchester for a few weeks because that was allowed, and we'd stay with her. And at that age, we didn't want to go back to live with my dad because we didn't really get on with his wife. But when I think about her, she was a bit of an ogre. However, all of a sudden, she's got these kids sprung on her,
Oh,
and they're
my
not
word.
hers,
Yeah.
right? So anyone would be the same. Anyway, so we come back and we say to her, "Can we stay? Can we stay?" "Yep, you're staying. You're not going back." And we were overjoyed. And then within 24 hours, she's changed her mind and he'd come and pick us up. And when I think about the trauma he went through, because he just wanted us to have a good life, and his way of good life meant you were provided for, you were educated, and you stayed out of trouble and all that sort of thing. it would have been very different, I think, had we not been taken by him.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I know you adored your dad. I mean, I remember having conversations before about him when we worked together, and he was a massive influence on your life and your work ethic.
Chinese people as a whole work really hard. And yeah, he did instill that on all of us, me and my siblings. Most of them run their own businesses now, and they have a work ethic. They're always got, even the ones that don't, they're there if you want them to help, and their bosses love them because they will work. They're not clock watchers, you know. It's not how you work. And he brought us up like that. But he was really. I got into trouble with him a little bit because I was a bit of a rebel, as in I was very sporty. I was this rake of a child that just didn't keep still. I was always into something where my sisters weren't. And I was a little bit of the odd one out, really. He didn't like that rebellion in me. And in those days, you'd get the strap across the back of your leg. Yeah. And that happened more than often. And we say now, God, so sexist.
Imagine now.
Can you imagine? And we'd see him, we think, oh, God, we're going to get... I mean, when I was in school, you got the canes.
Yeah, that's right.
So he was very... his brothers and... he's had two brothers and a sister, and all their children are overachievers, all very successful to this day. They've all done really, really well. And we did okay, but we did okay, not academically, we did it through business. Yeah. And I think we put it down to our home was a little bit broken. They had mum and dad.
You didn't have that stability.
We didn't. So we put it like that. So then I got to about 16, 17, and Chinese people are gamblers.
Yeah,
renowned gamblers. So every weekend it wasn't unusual to follow him down to the casino, and we'd sit in the casino in Bristol and eat steak and chips while he gambled. And then we'd drive back at 3 a.m. That was normal. And I was in there one day, and I was approached by the organisers of this Miss Cathay Pacific that I'd let you know all about. I was 17 at the time. And they said, would you represent Bristol? And I said, no. I was a bit shy. My
Cathay
sister,
Pacific are a huge airline, aren't they?
And in those days, you had to be Chinese of some sort. You could be mixed, but you had to be Chinese. And I said, no, that's not for me. And my sister Susan said, yes, she will. Pushed me forward. So off I went, and I did the heat in Bristol. And I won that heat. And then the final was the UK. So I thought, I don't want to do this. And the final was in Odeon Cinema, Leicester Square. And the prize was, in those days, £5,000.
Wow.
It was a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And
you were in the centre of Chinatown there as well, aren't you? So.
And 2 first-class tickets to Hong Kong. So I went along, and I'd got my outfit. I'd bought my swimming costume. You had to do a bloody swimming costume thing. Right? So I bought this navy blue thing from Marks and Spencer's. I'll never forget it. It was very modest. And I had an evening dress. So you had to do those 2 things. And all these other girls that were in this were in really beautiful, sexy swimwear, flowers in their hair, and they really knew about their sexuality. I didn't. And I was this shy, goofy kid, really. Anyway, and I won that. My dad didn't come to that, actually.
Did he knew you were taking part?
He knew I was taking part, and he said, you're not going to win that. This is real Chinese mentality. You're not going to win that. And he said, go and do what you want to do, but you're not going to win it. So off I go, and I can hear my sisters in the crowd screaming, because they announced the winner in Chinese, obviously, and the audience all full of China. I'm sitting out the back with my parka coat on, zipped up to the thing so you could only see my eyes, not expecting to go any further, and then they called me out. I think part of it was when we went out...
Not in your parka, though. You didn't come out in your parka, did you?
No. But I lost my voice a little bit because I was so cold. But when I'd gone out, they asked you questions like, what do you do with the money? And I think because at the time I spoke quite fluent Hakka, and they were very surprised knowing I was only mixed Chinese, because it's a dialect that a lot of people don't speak. Right. And there's a bit snobbery. And there's a lot... In that area, there's a lot of Hakka people. So I and the organisers nudging me and saying, it's you. So I thought, well, OK, I got my parka coat off and went out there. So I was crowned Miss Cathay Pacific, and I phoned my dad. He was asleep. I thought, I'm going to tell him. So I had to tell him I was his accountant, otherwise he wouldn't get out of bed. Because, restaurants don't close till 2 a.m, and this was like late at night the next day. And so he got out and I said, I've won. And there was no reaction, really.
How funny.
And then myself and my sister went to Hong Kong.
And this is 1984?
1984.
So we didn't have mobile phones. It's not as if you could phone him on the mobiles, drop him a text, a WhatsApp, anything like that.
He was very, I broke my leg once when I was 15. Yeah, would have been you, wouldn't it? That was his attitude. Yeah. I've disturbed his sleep because he's got to come pick me up from school, and I was more worried about that. And I've got a plaster on my leg. But anyway, so we went to Hong Kong. He was quite happy about that because he was very anti-UK at the time, as a lot of people are when they come here, because they're almost begrudging their homeland. But he never went back for 15 years. And so he was happy I was going there. Mm. So I went there and I went to the village, and we're talking a village 4 miles from the border of China. And I remember walking down the road and at the time there was gates where beyond the gates is communist China. Hong Kong this time belongs to the UK colony. So I walk up to the gate and I'm looking through the gate and they're marching, with their green suits and the red star.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad was a communist. He loved all that. We learnt the Chinese national anthem when we were 7. It was ridiculous. The Mao Zedong. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he loved Mao Zedong. And I thought, this is surreal. They were all with their guns and green outfits and the red star. And then the village was, 4 miles from that. So I bummed about there for 4, 5, 6 months. Came back, and I spoke really fluent Chinese then because nobody in the village spoke English. They call it English, or they called me, here's the ghost girl, because they've got a name for Western people. They call them ghosts because it's pale.
Pale, yeah.
And it's not meant to be offensive. It's like, here comes the ghost girl, and they considered that to be me. Very strange feeling of not belonging to either side. We all grew up with that. Yeah. Although it was probably 70-30. We always felt Chinese because of our upbringing. And then there was a little part of us that thought, hold on a minute, we have got a mixed parent here, but our culture was just that. Yeah.
And had your mum passed by this time? Or
She did die at the age of 52.
Right.
And she was a strange character. We only knew her age when she died.
Wow.
She was very secretive. She was a very kind woman. Like we'd come home sometime. Goes, who's that? She goes, they were waiting at the bus stop. It was raining. Oh, all right. And she'd say, well, you wouldn't like to be standing in the bus stop while it was raining, would you? She was a very eccentric character. So anyway, we were in Hong Kong and I stayed there and I was bumming about. I was 17 and my sister went and got a job. And my sister who went with me never came back. She stayed there all her life and she worked there for 20 years, married there, had children. She's eventually come back now because she's got a business in the UK, but she sent me home. I literally was hanging around the village, enjoying life, to be honest, and I didn't want to come back to England. It's my favourite place in the world. But I did. Came back, and then it's where I met my first husband when I came back. He was Greek Cypriot. I moved with him to London, and that caused a little bit of tension with my father.
Yeah, of course.
Because he wanted us to marry Chinese men, although he married a Greek lady. And so he was a shipbroker, my first husband, and he worked in the stock exchange in those days, which was the 80s in London.
Right.
We moved all around London, North London, and I spent a lot of time in the Greek culture and community, learnt to speak the language a little bit so I could communicate, because we ended up getting married. And I was only 19. But it wasn't unusual in the 80s, was it, to get married at 19? So I learnt the language so I could speak to my mother-in-law. And then we went through a really horrible patch in our marriage. Our son was about 5 or 6, 5. And unfortunately, my first husband got killed tragically in a car crash. Yeah. I joined the job by then. So I joined the job. And in those days, you didn't really get a lot of flexibility. You didn't get much help
No, there was no flexibility. There was no cognizance of the fact that you were a parent, a mother.
No.
Even for dads as well. You know, the equality issues. There was nothing there that would support family life. You just got on with it.
Yeah.
So what year was it that you joined the job?
94.
94.
89. Yes, so my son was 5. And at first, I'd been in the job a couple of years. And, there was no flexibility. And I remember at the time, the chief constable at the time was really strict. And nobody liked him very much. Oh, they didn't. He was a bugger. Anyway, and I was very focused on, I joined the police really fluke. I sat in a bar one day because I worked in the city in London. I was bored out of my brain. In fact, I worked for a set of receivers and I was a PA to this boss. And I remember him buying a crash helmet from one of the racing drivers, famous racing driver, the one who got a broken leg, can't even remember his name now. And he bought this crash helmet and it had been signed and he brought it back to the office and he was showing us all and look at this, and the signature came off. He paid £8,000 for it.
Oh my God.
So he sent me to one of the hotels in London to get it re-signed by this racing driver. And I'm young, I'm 18 or something. So I go along and the Dorchester, meet the racing driver. He signs it again and says, tell your boss not to keep handling it around. And that was my sort of life. And he asked me at lunchtime to go and get him a carton of orange juice. So I went and got it, come back, put it on his desk, went back to my desk, carried on working. About 3 hours later, he goes, I'm so thirsty. I said, I bought you a carton of orange juice. And this is where my head began to think, I'm not putting up with your crap. And I said, there it is. He said, yes, but you didn't give me scissors to open it.
Oh, my life.
And I looked at him, and I know I've got a look on my face that many of my colleagues go, yeah, it's there, Karen. I went, right, okay. I thought, I can't do this anymore. I came from a father that taught us how to be very independent and not expect that from people. Sat in the bar, and in the newspaper, this big... I don't know if you remember years ago, it used to be, could you?
Yeah, could you?
Could you? And I thought, yeah. And I literally filled it out there in the bar, cut it out, put it in an envelope and stuck it in the postbox. I had no desire to be a copper. It wasn't something I'm Juliet Bravo, used to watch that. And I never ever mentioned it. And then I got a reply and said, can you come and take some tests? I thought, OK, I'm going along to this. But the minute I stepped into that environment, I felt I'd found my vocation. Yeah. I really did. I belonged. I just loved everything about it.
Yeah.
And in those days, you had to do a dictation test. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And there was about 55 of us, and they'd already told us we've had 360 3,600 applications. There's 53 jobs. I thought, God's sake. Or 23 jobs it was at the time. So I was sitting there and we're doing this dictation. Somebody stands at the front, they read out a passage, you've got to scribble it down and then you get half an hour to punctuate it and da-da-da. And I sat there all nervous and we'd done that. And they said, right, we're going to call these people out, and when we call your name out, you go through that door and you stand in there. And there was 9 of us. And in my head I thought, oh my God, Karen, you've bloody failed. You're one of these 9. But we weren't. We were the only 9 that got it right. And it was crazy.
Wow.
That's changed, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I went through all the tests and and I just kept getting through. And I thought, this is for me. And then I ended up in Shotley for where the training thing was.
Yeah.
I think that's where my reputation for being, because I think I've got a bit of reputation of being a little bit intimidating. I thought, what, me? I'm 5'4".
No nonsense, though. There's no...
But I can't hold things in. I grew up I sat in a classroom, 23 of us, and I remember we were discussing forms, and I think this was the first thing where people thought, oh. And one of the girls in there said, yeah, but you know what? Foreigners come to our country and they can't fill these forms out. Like, they come from Spain. And I couldn't even hold it. It slipped out. There was no filter. And I said, do you speak Spanish then? I was angry.
Yeah,
she went, no. I went, well, what are you talking about then? Yeah, I'd had a different life. I really had.
Well, you were already speaking a number of different languages, and
it was the expectation of, why do you think people have got to speak your language? Yes, you know, we all go to countries and we respect other people's cultures. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
But so it sort of started from there. And I've never, ever been one of these people that, you know, I'm going to trip people up. And once I got into the police, I then a couple of years in, my husband had died, and I took about 6 months out to look after my son because I needed to do that. And then I went back because I was climbing the walls. And I remember welfare coming around and saying to me, "You all right?" I said, "Not really. My son's distraught. I'm distraught." And she said to me, "Well, you're mourning for 2 people, so you'll be fine." And that was the only contact I had. And I never had, which I think they have now, I never had any, I had to actually take a career break.
Yeah.
And I thought, you should have really given me time off because I'd been back type of thing. But
So, and what year was this? I mean...
it was about 96.
Right.
Think,
and where
like
were
that.
you stationed then? Were you...
I was in Braintree.
Braintree, yeah.
Braintree Division. And I was a uniform officer.
Yeah.
And I was a very... I do it today. I don't like being told off for something that I know I've done wrong.
That you know you've done wrong.
Yes.
You don't need to be reminded of it.
So I won't do it. Do you know, if somebody says to me, "Oh, just chuck that over there, nobody will notice." Oh, no, I'm not doing that.
I'm exactly the same.
I can't do something that I know is wrong,
no.
and I'm going to get told off for it. So that was the same with work.
I can do things wrong on my own volition, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to be told that, "Oh, that's all right, cut the corner, you'll be..."
Yeah, I can't do that. And again, that's come from my father, I think.
Yeah.
He couldn't bear that. You weren't allowed to tell lies.
No.
So I was stationed at Braintree, and that was tough because I was now a single parent and clock watching. And when I was in work, and I'd give 150%. But when it got to, if I was off at 5, I had to go at 5. I've got a young boy standing at the school gate.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was paying for a childminder, which a very good childminder, I have to say, that took half my wages, to be honest. But I just thought, you know, I'm going to do this for 10 years. I'll give it 10 years of my life, and then I'll have to find something else to do, which didn't happen. Because once I was in, and I loved it, and I would do it all over again.
Yeah.
There were moments where I thought, do something else within. I stayed within uniform, but I knew I wanted to become a DC very early on.
Yeah.
And I thought about this yesterday, actually. I remember just hanging around the CID office all the time. And if something came in, you know, a rape or something that required any length of investigation, I'd volunteer afterward. I'll go. They go, what, to take statements? Yeah, I'll go take statements. I just wanted to build up this.
And we were in the new police station then?
No, we were. Yes, we were. We were.
In the Avenue.
Yeah, and I can't remember the DCI's name now. Dave. Very old.
96 was this? Was this
Yeah,
before,
and he used to walk round in his slippers.
Before Apache or after Apache?
Because there was a fruit machine in the canteen where they all used to hang out.
Oh, you're thinking of Dave Bailey?
Yes, Dave Bailey.
Yeah, Dave Bailey.
He was the DCI, and he called me in, and I eventually said, "I want to come on your team," and he said, "Come on then." I'd only done about 18 months then.
Yeah.
He called me in his office one day and he said, "I want to show you my wage slips." He always did this, I think. So I'll go, okay, because that's my first ever wage slip. He showed me it. I kept it. And he had his slippers on. He was a character and a half, wasn't he?
He was a character.
And he goes, "You screwed my desk yet, girl?" I said, and I looked at him and thought, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, you ought to, because just so you know, I screw all your desks."
Yeah.
So if you don't want me to see nothing, don't keep it in there, he said. I'll never forget that. And I said, "Okay, then thank you, sir." And off I went. And that was it. I stayed on CRD from that on. I had an attachment and I loved it. And then obviously I had to take the exams afterwards. And so really I moved around the county, north of the county, doing that, which I absolutely loved. I really loved that. It is what I wanted in my brain as well. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, I actually like walking Bobby on the beat.
Yeah.
Loved stopping talking to people and chatting, and I loved all that.
Yeah.
And the community, you know, getting to know them. But my collar number when I first joined was my date of birth, which is 1966. And that number
I remember it.
Followed me. I'd get complaints. I weren't even there. I was off duty there in 1966. And when I first joined the police, it opened me. I had not been called a chink for 20 years. I got called that in school. Hence, we'd fight all the time.
Yeah.
And then I got called it by a member of public, which really took me back. I thought, oh, what? A grown-up calling me that? So that happened quite a lot, actually. I'd got called all sorts of things. And I thought, how strange. I found that really strange.
Yeah.
People were afraid of it, though, other colleagues. They were afraid. And I said, you've got to react to this. Don't, I remember being in custody one day and this girl needed searching. I happened to be the only female in the building. And I don't know what it is. The police has built something in me. Perhaps my father built something where I'm not really afraid of females at all. Can you search this girl? She was drunk and she was handcuffed. And I come down the stairs and she goes, and there was 2 male officers there and the sergeant. And she said, oh, you've brought the chink down, have you? Straight away. So I said nothing. My face stayed straight. And I'm itching to punch her.
Yeah.
So she's got these handcuffs on. She then goes into a barrage of insults. You're just a chink. You're a foreigner. Oh, what are you, the token of this station? And da-da-da-da-da. And it went on. And I look at the sergeant who's saying nothing. And I said to him, I hope you're writing this all down. I said, right, can you... And I looked at the 2 male officers and they're a bit shy about getting near her because she's quite all over the place. So you're going to be searched. And that's all I said to her. You're effing not searching me. I said, I didn't even say anything. I didn't get into an argument with her. I put my gloves on, went over to her, and I got her up against the custody desk, patted her down, and she's kicking and screaming and spitting. And then she puts her fingers in her mouth and pulls her rings off, and they go down her throat. So she's now choking. I thought, I'll give it a few minutes. I didn't. So I got a hold of her. We get the rings out. I go, can you take her handcuffs off? Because we're going to get into a bit of a rumble-tumble here. So they take her hands out, and she's not as strong as me. She's bigger than me, but she's not as strong as me. And I've got a few things that I've learned in the police to help out, I suppose. You're a strong chink. For a woman or something. And I then got her on the floor, and these male officers are still watching me because they're afraid to touch her. And those things I struggled with a little bit. I said, look, it's got nothing to do with anything. I'm here, you're here, you need to... But I didn't need their help in the end, but she was put in a cell. Next day, I'm sitting outside the police station and she comes home and asks me for a light. She's sober now. So I always put it down to that.
Yeah.
She's drunk. But having said that, things have come out of her mouth that shouldn't have come, and obviously it came out in court and stuff. And I got a lot of that. I got a lot of, just when you were upsetting people, they would say that.
How did you find the humour in the police station? I mean, we talk about banter. And some of it, and I will tell you now, I remember someone shouting out, anybody else want a chinky? And I remember you challenging them at the time.
Yeah.
But we didn't know then that was offensive to you. We didn't understand the connotations of what we were actually saying. I think it's probably Barry Johnson, bless his soul. But we didn't understand why that was offensive. But how was it as a Chinese woman working in a predominantly heterosexual white environment? How was that for you?
98% of the time, fine. Racism can be really subtle, and that's why I always... But I'm also not afraid to say things, and if I offend somebody, they'll tell me. You're right, they'd always say, oh, we're going for a chinky, because that's what they've been brought up to.
Yeah.
And I'd always correct them, them. And that's enough for me. Because they didn't know about it, and they now do. So,
can you explain? Because there's a lot of people will be listening to this. Why is that term offensive?
It's all to do with the Chin keys, CHIN key KEE, government. Right. That was years ago. Do you remember water margin?
Yeah.
With the ponytails.
Yeah.
They were a little bit like Nazis.
Right.
So it's the same sort of thing. The equivalent of.
Oh, okay.
And so Chinese people are very offended by it.
Yeah.
And they weren't nice people.
No.
And we got called. I lived in Chinese takeaway all my life, and we got insulted all the time, and watching my father use his skills outside the restaurant and things like that. And we grew up being called names and chased around the playground and all the rest of it, and we'd end up in fights all the time. In fact, and I'm going off, but my niece, who's now 30, she's a virologist, she came to England when she was 7, and I know I'm not on camera, but she was in the park with my son and her brother, and some of the boys there got their eyes and made slanty eyes, and she didn't get it. She did not know what they were doing.
No.
Because she'd never seen that before.
No.
They were making these noises and going like this with their eyes. And she came home, and of course my son got into a fight over it. And when she came home, she was 6, and she told her mum, Alex got into a fight, Mummy, because the boys they were saying chinky, and they were putting their fingers on their eyes. And because everyone in Hong Kong's got almond eyes, she didn't even know what that meant. No. It seemed odd. So it was, so I didn't come across a lot of it at all. I didn't. And if I did come across anything, I would certainly pull that one person to one side and say, that's really offensive, and tell them why. Yeah. And hopefully they then go on to tell someone else that it's offensive and they don't say it again. Yeah. And that was enough for me, because we're all in that position, aren't we? You know, I think. Yeah,
and I think we're a similar age. You're a bit younger than me, but we've come up in a different culture. It's interesting now because we're coming up to Christmas, and Christmas for us was Morecambe and Wise and the two Ronnies. I'm not sure what it was like working in your dad's restaurant at that time, but that's how we were, and the humour was puerile, but it was safe family humour. And yes, of course, people would be offended by some of that humour now. I'm not sure that they went out of their way to be offensive, but the interesting term now is where you've got some musical groups, you know, like the drill and all that sort of stuff, where they glorify violence, and that seemed to be okay. And I can't come to terms with the paradox in the two forms of entertainment. But I'm glad you said that, because as I said to you earlier on before we started, if I thought that I had been party to anything that offended anybody, I'm a nothingist. Mrs. Maleary will tell you I'm not allowed to be I'm not allowed to have an opinion. Certainly not allowed to be offensive, because that's not, I'm strong-willed and I would deal with things, but I would never go out of my way to be offensive to someone. So I'm really pleased you said that. What was the highlight working on the CID, apart from working with great people there, of course, but what was the highlight working on CID?
Oh, I loved all of it. I loved the fact that I was given a challenge every time a job came in. I love digging. I mean, if people who are on CID now who don't like digging, then they're in the wrong job, aren't they?
Yeah, of course.
I remember going into a petrol station one day and coming out and bumping into a young probationer, and this was, 10 years ago, and he was saying, I was in here, last week, and there was a robbery, and I'd just got my milk and gone, and the robbery happened. Thank God I'd got my milk and gone. And I thought, are we in the same job? Are we in this? How often does that happen?
Oh, no.
But it was about putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. Yeah. And later on in my career, when I think there was people joke in the job about me, and they go, she don't stay around for long. I did, I was on at CID for a long time. But if I became a little bit demotivated, because let's face it, we see some rubbish, then I just moved teams, or I just moved on to a little bit something else that would challenge me again, and it would then see me through another couple of years. And because you'd hear people going, I've only got 10 years left.
Oh, no.
And they're wasting their life away.
It's the only job where when you walk up to somebody and they say, how long have you got left? It's the only job. And what you actually did, and I wish I'd have done it earlier, was the right thing, because what happens is you become complacent in your role and you become very proficient in your role, but because you haven't been challenged, whether that's from an educational perspective or a new dynamic in the way that you're investigating something, because you haven't had that challenge, you become demotivated, and you don't realise you're demotivated, and you start to moan about how bad it is. Yeah. And the only person who can change how bad it is the person who becomes demotivated.
I mean, I remember the first week, actually, at Braintree, where I was given my uniform and it was all fresh, and I walked in the station, some of the officers that have just retired actually were there moaning. Oh, bloody job. And it was in the times when we had the Brightland Sea going on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they were all tired and moaning, and I was listening and thinking,
they were earning a fortune as well.
Oh, this bloody job. And they were all moaning. But that hasn't changed, has it? I mean, I speak to some young coppers now who have joined their total different breed, but they're moaning. Yeah. And it's like, well, that's how it is. And unfortunately, and I used to say to people, just go and do your job. You're getting paid for it quite handsomely, and go home and enjoy life. Yeah. And I took that attitude, and I think after my first husband died, I sort of took that attitude on, really. I thought, do you know what? Life is over in a second, and I'm struggling here. And I remember, I'd go in, do all my work, sit tight, and I'd clock watch and think, right, it's 5 to 5, I've got to get out of here to pick my son up, because there was nobody else to do that at the time. But I'd be back in early in the morning, he'd be off at school, and and it went on like that. And the struggles, they were hard, but I kept thinking, it'll get better. He's going to get older. I've only had one son. And they do get better. But nowadays, I mean, I remember you can take time off and go and breastfeed if you want.
Yeah.
That was unheard of.
I know.
But I was a real grump when it came to other pregnant women. I became really... I thought, this can't be possible. And wrongly or rightly, I used to think, oh, God's sake, this is the job. It's, nights, lates and earlies. If you can't do that...
I had somebody, when I was at the DCI over at Harlow, I had somebody apply for a flexible working pattern so that they could fit in with their family life, which was fine. But their flexible working pattern was Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. And I was told that I wasn't allowed to take into account the husband, because the husband was in the job. And I said, OK, well, let's balance this up, because you can do some shifts and your husband can do the others. And the federation person, I mean, at the end of the day, I won. But it wasn't about me winning. It was about doing the right thing for the job. And it's not because I'm unsympathetic. I'm a dad. I've got 2 boys. I'm a grandfather. But the pendulum needs to come back needs to be in the middle, because when you were there, it was one way, completely the other way. Now it's completely the other. And do you know what? I don't blame anybody for not taking advantage of it, but utilising what is available to them. I don't blame any. But what I do is I blame the system for allowing it to go that far. But that's how it was. So you're at Braintree CID? Braintree
CID, and I worked there for a long time with yourself and various other people. My brother, I don't know if you remember my brother, who came a custody attendant.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
He was hilarious. He was funny. And I always remember my DI at the time saying, I'd gone down to see him one morning, and he'd always wanted to be a policeman, but he'd got pins in his shoulders and cruciate ligament injuries, and he just couldn't. There was no way he was going to get through that. And so he became a jailer. And so he'd never gone through the training of a police officer. No. So I used to have to shush him sometimes. We knew exactly who we were. We weren't afraid of... I mean, you remember in the days where you had to have the pink sheet?
Oh, yeah.
So he'd go down to the cell and he'd get all these abuse from prisoners, which went straight over his head. And he'd come back and he wrote on the custody sheet, went down to the cell... DP, detained person as well. And he put underneath there, detained person called me a fat cunt. And he's written it on the pink sheet, right? So I says to him, and then underneath, he's put, cheeky bastard, I thought I'd lost £3 this week.
Oh, no.
I'll never forget this, because I remember the inspector coming down and reading it. Obviously, it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. Yeah. He said, well, you told me I've got to write every conversation down. And he said, bloody cheeky bastard, I lost £3. But he wasn't offended by it at all, because he knows he was dealing with.
Oh, my God, that's hilarious.
And, he's let somebody go out for a cigarette in the yard, and he was a heroin addict, actually, skinny little thing, and he said, I'm not coming back in. And my brother just said, you are, picks him up under his arm, puts him back in the cell, and obviously got told you can't be physical. And he goes, well, he wouldn't come back in. So in the end, he said, you know what, I can't be this person that I don't want to be. And so those are his experience. We were in the same station, but him and I thought this was hilarious. We didn't even think anything of it.
But don't you think now that society... they're looking to be offended? There are some sections of society, and that's all sections, irrespective of race, creed or colour, people just want to be offended so that they can say that they've been offended. Yeah. And that's a really sad indictment. So where did you go to? You've done Braintree CID.
I did Braintree CID, and then I did Houston and Witham. And then I decided I was going to go to the Fraud Squad in the City of London. So I left Essex, went there.
With the lovely Ben Flanagan.
Yeah, he was on my team actually before, and he went there, and I worked in his team. And actually, I got to City London, Fraud Squad, and the whole teams were made up of county forces.
County forces, yeah.
It was an odd force to work for me. I was so used to not having much in Essex, as in, you're going to go and sit in a van for 3 hours. And when you work for the city, you're staying in the Marriott.
Yeah.
It was very different. And the team I worked with, I remember going in one day and there was this cordon up. I thought, something exciting's happened. I mean, because it was early 2000, so not much happened in the city at the, weekend. And got into work and I said, what's happening? And they go, there's been a shooting. Trident. Oh, right. Barbican. 2 miles away? Why are we cordoning up Liverpool Street Station? It was very strange. So we sat in this meeting. There was probably 4 sergeants, a DI, a DCI and me. And I thought, are we investigating one job here? Or it was odd. It was just odd.
And Trident is black on black shooting.
Yeah, it was the black on black shootings, the gangs. And fortunately, the girl survived. It was a bullet had hit the metal in her bra.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was miles away.
Yeah.
So
They have
I
a different
remember
perspective.
thinking, yeah, very different. I'd got a sergeant who worked with me who hadn't ever investigated a rape, and he'd been in the police 17 years. So they had different crimes to deal with. I stayed there for a little while, and I thought, I just don't. I feel I'm missing home. I really was missing home, and I meant that by county force.
Yeah, yeah.
They police very differently. And I knew a few people in Essex. I thought, I did a couple of years there. And I decided to come back to Essex. So I phoned up headquarters, and they literally said to me, where do you want to go? I said, can I come straight back? Yes, you can. Where do you want to go? There were a few options, but Stansted was one of them. I thought, I'm not going to Basildon, because I live north of the county. I'll go to Stansted. So I'll go to Stansted. I'm a DC there for a couple of years. It was okay. I think your brother was there at the time, maybe, on firearms. Pleasant place to work. Everyone's going on holiday. They're all happy.
Everyone's happy.
But all the crime is fraudy and, a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of, things going on because I think at one time there was Braintree sort of did a bit with them.
Well, yeah, because Stansted's in a funny place.
Yeah.
It's got its own command team and what have you, but because of its geographical location, it found itself linking in with Braintree because it's straight down the A120.
So, yeah, I joined the CID team. It was a small team. And even then, I thought, I remember getting a phone call and they're saying, because there's only 3 cells there, this van's pulled into Ryanair, which is on the other side of the airport, and stolen 60 trolleys, the air hose trolleys. And some of the guys in the office, they'd been there, they were on their way out now.
Yeah.
4 weeks to retirement or something like that. So they couldn't be bothered with anything like that. They just want to go. And there's me thinking, well, they can't get very far with 60 bloody trolleys, can they?
Aluminium trolleys are worth a lot of money.
And, you're inside here for a long time. And I'm sitting there and they're not answering this call. And I said, well, I bloody am. So I phoned up the scrap dealer in Colchester. I said, you've got 60 trolleys there from Ryanair? Yeah. And I could hear these officers going, she's only gone and found them. Well, it took a phone call, didn't it? Where are they going to put these 60 trolleys? What would you do if you had them? You'd go and melt them down. So we end up getting them back. And it was jobs like that.
Yeah.
Some silly jobs. I remember...
Were you there for any of the hijackings?
Yeah, I was. The strange thing is, when you're a DC at Stansted, you have to go... This was when El Al,
Yeah.
Do you remember them?
Yeah, we used to have
Thursday.
to do the armed support around the flight.
So DC had to go in the tower every Thursday.
Wow.
Which was an experience, sitting up there with them. Every Thursday, when the LL flight comes in, the whole airport's cordoned off, and you get this little brief, and it tells you what to say if an aeroplane's hijacked. And you say, I'm the police officer. They literally hand it over to you. They're air traffic control. Right, police officer, this is LL flight.
Talking to this microphone.
So I'm you have to read out the thing to the pilot. So we were just sat there, all come in. And there's a new girl who joined my team. I can't remember her name now, but she was a sergeant from the Met.
Right.
And she joins our team. So I've done my Thursday stint in the tower, go home, next day's hers, and the next day, bugger me, they're hijacked.
No way.
And she's like, oh my God, she's up in the tower and she's having to read this thing. And I can't remember what the airline was. I'm sure it came from Greece.
I know we've had the Sudanese. I can't remember.
It was probably the last one.
Yeah, I can't remember what that was now.
Yeah, so, but I had been involved in the one before that, but as a uniform officer.
Right.
When I'd gone up there to guard the gate and worked with the SAS, or not worked with them, they come from it, and being in total awe of them.
Yeah.
And Kate Adie was there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, you know, she puts her thing up and she turns night into day so she can see the camera. And I remember being there with an officer and we're standing there trying to get in camera shot because, you know, this is Kate Adie. And the SAS turning up in their twos and being really impressed with them.
Yeah, they are different. I've got some friends who are from Hereford and... do
you know what?
They're a different breed.
Yeah, they are. They really are. And I think I spent my whole life being in awe of that type of policing. Really did. They were so impressive. So I was on CRD for a little while. And then I went to a job in the airport where British Airways had called us, and it's 6 o'clock. And they said, can you, you know, we've got thefts and all the rest of it. Oh, sorry. And I got into a bit of a confrontation with somebody. I was in suit, which made me feel a little bit nervous and uncomfortable. And I thought, I don't like this. I've never liked this. And I got back to my office and I thought, I've got to do something about this. I can't be this officer that's scared of confrontation. I've never been scared of it. No. So I walked around the corner, around the block into the DI's office and said, can I do my firearms assessment? And he looked at me and he said, you serious? I said, yeah, why not? Do you think I could do it? And he said, yeah, if you want to. Well, they were desperate for females. Of course they want you. Off you go. So I go down to, booked it in, and it looked fun. You know, you see them all walking around. Never picked a gun up in my life. So I go down to headquarters, do my assessment, and I'll never forget the day that the sergeant at the time calls us all in. And at this time, I've got a suit on, and my nails are all manicured. And I'm sitting there and he stands up in front of the 20 of us who are about to do this assessment. We don't know how to do it, what to do or anything. And he said, I don't care how big your biceps are. If you mess up, you're out. And because there was a lot of young lads there, they've got these T-shirts on, they're really tight around their arms. And I'm sat there thinking, shit, I've got long nails. So he gives us a time of, I think I happen to be one of the last ones. I go straight over to the office and get these big as paracetamol and I've cut these nails down. No way. Cut them all down. I'm not letting anything
get between you and MP5 this, or whatever you're using.
There's no way. So I'm cutting them off. Anyway, do the assessment, and I have to say it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And then you get called in, don't you? And there was only 9 female AFOs at this time. And
that's right across the county.
Right across, yeah.
3,000 plus police officers.
Yeah. And I think firearms was the hardest training I've ever done in my life, to be honest. So I got through the assessment, which is tough in itself. But I think your instinct, and I always say this for females, because most females, you walk into a room, if somebody's in there, you're very edgy. You're not going to go barging in. You're going to peep, because I don't want to be attacked by a man or anybody, but a man especially.
Self-preservation.
Yeah, the strength in me. So I got into that, and then I went off and did the course, and that was tough. 12 weeks of hell.
Where did you have to go for your firearms?
We went all over the place. I can't remember where we stayed now, where we stayed for the month, but I do remember halfway through phoning my husband and saying, don't know if I can do this. And him saying to me, you've come so far. Yeah. Oh, all right, okay. Because you'd think you'd had a great day, and then you get told, what the hell was that type of thing. And quite rightly.
Sometimes.
But I'd never held a gun in my life. I was brought up with Cindy dolls. I don't want to play cowboys and Indians. I don't want to roll around in the mud. So I found that a challenge to have to suddenly become almost gung-ho, which I'm not. But having said that, got through it. And at the end of it, there's nothing better feeling than the sergeant then saying to you, congratulations, you've got your permit. But I'd already had gossip in the ears. Of course, she's got a permit. She's got 2 tickets already. And I spoke to the sergeant about that, because the fear inside me was thinking, you're not giving me this permit for that. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I've heard some talk outside that I'm getting a ticket because, one, I'm female, one, I'm ethnic minority in the police. Don't be so ridiculous. you've earned this merit. Fine, just needed to know that. I mean, I don't know why I questioned him, to be honest, because I'm sure that.
But that reassurance is sometimes, you know, you just want that reassurance. And to be fair, they're not going to say to you, "Well, yeah, actually, Karen, we are going to choose you for those reasons."
Of course
they're not
not.
going to do that.
And I don't ever think that was ever going to be a case. But, you know, it was gossip. But
you wouldn't pass that if you weren't capable of carrying a firearm, because the life and death situations that you get involved in as an AFO, you know, it's incredible. And nobody would thank you if something went horribly wrong.
No, exactly. And I was stationed at Stansted, and so it was me and 12 on a team. So there's one female officer on each team. And I got on with the team, I have to say, really, really well. It helped me learn all about men, inside and out. And I was like the female, and it's funny. And you teach them lots about women, to be honest, because they can answer you. They'll ask you stuff. And they were... I think police officers in general are one of the best people I've ever met in my life. I think they're just great people. They're so broad in everything. Yeah. They're very deep, they can be. Yeah. They hide an awful lot if they can, as in about their personal self. But walking around the airport and talking to people going on holiday was lovely. And we'd go for the tests every month where you had to, you know, get your 50 bullets, and it used to infuriate them because I say, right, how many do I need to get set in the target? They go 40. I said, right, I'll get 41 then. And they'd say to me, why can't you try and get 50, Nicolaou? Because I don't need 50. I need 41.
Everything else is wasted effort.
and that's exactly what happened all the time. And they used to, because they're not going to drop one, you know. And it's like, why would you? You don't need to do that. Great people.
Yeah.
And then after a little while, the training, it was just a lot for me. I found every month I've got to now roll around the floor and be this person that I naturally wasn't. I mean, in the airport, I don't know, for people who listen, they send out a car county, don't they?
Yeah.
So I go on county car one day, and I go out with another officer, and he said to me all the way there, I've never heard you be so quiet. I said, because in my head, I potentially could now shoot with someone. We're going to a live job.
Yeah.
And I'd got an MP5 at that time, and I think that's the only time ever I've had to raise a gun to somebody with the red dot to keep them where they are while they're being searched, And afterwards I questioned myself, would I have shot? And I think I would have.
Yeah.
I definitely would have. And people say, would you have shot someone? Yeah. If it meant saving me, my colleague, or anyone else, I would have shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the one and only time I've ever had to do that. But yeah, no, I was prepared to do that.
And how long did you serve on firearms?
2 years. And then I bumped into one of the sergeants at headquarters, actually, walking round, and he said to me, can you come and become a crime trainer at the college? And I thought, oh, shall I, shan't I? At the time, we were doing 12-hour shifts non-stop. And I thought, yeah, I'll do it for a couple of years, so I did that. Moved to the college, taught crime for a couple of years. Soon got fed up with that, though. It's hard teaching people, isn't it?
It is hard. I wouldn't be a good teacher.
Do you know, it's hard. Hard because I think some people are shocked what comes out of my mouth. In that I'm not going to wipe your backside.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll try and teach you, but if you don't want to learn, then I'm not going to spoon feed you.
Yeah, and I remember the probationer trainers calling me and saying, "Can you come and just introduce yourself to the class? They're going to be your class next week." And actually, the probationers loved the crime week. It was interesting.
Yeah.
And I went and sat in this class, and I looked around, and I thought, "What the hell?" And the trainers at the time were not officers. And they said, well, this is DC Nicolaou. In fact, it was acting DS then. She's going to be your trainer for next week. And I said, it's nice to meet you all. I only have 2 rules. Turn up at my class late. Don't bother coming in the door. Your phones go on silent and down on the floor, and you put your ties on. That's all I said to them. I could not stand what I was seeing.
No.
And they were rolling in 20 minutes later. Who do you think you are? Your trainer's here. You know, it was that sort of thing.
No,
so there was a lot of that. Take, that little thing on your shirt's not for you to hang your tie on. This is a uniform job.
Yeah. The old radio clips.
Yeah. And they swan around with it. It's all this sort of thing.
They became old lags before they...
Yeah, it was...
Yeah, or old sweats, I should say, before they had a right to become old sweats.
Yeah, and I found it all a little bit, because I was sort of... working for the department where you'd have other trainers come up to you, not police officers. Have you got a minute, Sarge? Yes, problem? Yeah, we've got 23 students in today. Okay. There's 26 chairs in the classroom? Oh, I'm not sure what you're asking me. Well, we've got too many chairs. Take them out then. Oh, we're not allowed to just take... Yeah, you just take them out. Do you know what I mean? So there was a lot of that. And so I became quite... I got fed up with it very easy because I can't just keep holding your hand and they say, oh, that's a bit rude. Well, it's not, is it? It's common sense. Take the 3 chairs out. Yeah. You know, it's like...
Yeah, but they don't want to use common sense and then there'll be some other reason why they can't do it.
Yeah. So then I thought I'm going back on division. I having said that, I did enjoy it. I was able to say to probationers who were really gutsy, you know, learn who these people are you're dealing with. Not everything's black and white. You know, you see people that you'll be arresting and you get fed up with them and learn where they come from. Learn and understand why they behave like they do and you'll be a much better police officer. Yeah. And I truly believe that. You know, they're not privileged. They may have come from somewhere that the only thing they can do is steal because they can't eat. You know,
absolutely.
You need to learn that because I think they have this tunnel vision sometimes.
Judgmental.
Yeah, and it's and I think lots of people do it, but actually read somebody's history, see where they come from. You know, it's do you know what I mean? It's like
no, I absolutely do.
We're not condoning their crimes, but get why they do it.
But I always remember, and he's dead now, Kevin Hugh MacLeod. And
I remember him actually.
But the reason his life was formed around heroin and it was his family life that had dragged him into that, the criminality that was wrapped around him. And there's families across Essex, across the country. And I've got, I'm not saying sympathy, but if you look at some of these people, you can understand why they do what they do. And we're going to see more of that because as the financial crisis hits across the UK, we're going to have more people taking risk around thefts, shop thefts, all those types of things to try and earn more money, you know, whether it be dealing drugs or whatever. You'll have more of a clandestine market around certain areas. But you need to understand you can't judge somebody as to why they've committed a crime. Some you can, but the social crime, because of their abject poverty, they're not there to judge people. No. Because we are lucky.
Yeah, we are. And, you know, some people are just not born into a great life, are they? And,
no,
you
not.
know, it's not as black and white as everyone thinks it is. And I think if young officers remember that, they will definitely be better coppers.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have to look at their own background and their own upbringing. And, you know, your testament to not having your own mum around.
Yeah.
You know, but the fact is that you've gone on and you've been successful. So how long did you serve in the end with Essex Police?
I did just under 18 years.
Right.
I ended up back in Colchester on the domestic violence unit for a couple of years before I resigned. I'd always had it in my mind I was going to resign, but I just wasn't quite ready, and every year I wasn't quite ready because I absolutely loved what I did. Yeah. But I was getting older, and I thought, do you know what? If I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it. The salon which I own now, I literally walked in here one day and said to the woman, "I really like your salon. Is it up for sale?" I used it, and I thought I was a tattooist. I trained as a tattooist.
Were you still in the police at this point? You were.
And I trained as a tattooist as a hobby, and me and my husband created a tattoo shop with some other tattoos, and I thought I'm going to do that full time.
Classic tattoos.
Yeah, classic body tattoos. And so I came in, she said, "Oh, I've just sold it." And I said, "Oh, that's a shame. Well, here's my number," because things fall through, don't they?
This place here.
Yeah, this place here.
Let's put it, Aspects of Beauty is a fantastic... It's wasted on somebody like me. I've got a face for radio, but they've got everything here, you know. And so you've walked into Aspects of Beauty. So I walked in and
gave them my number and everything and said, "Look, if it falls through, my husband's I'd remarried by then, and my husband's got a restaurant down the road. And if you're interested in selling,
great restaurant as well."
And she phoned me up 6 months later and said, "Are you still interested? Because I don't like the girl I've sold it to, and I'd like to sell it to you."
Bizarre.
So I bought it. Didn't work here. With the plan that I was going to then retire.
So you were in the police, so you had a business...
Still in the police, yeah.
Applied for a business interest in the police?
In the beginning, I remember years ago when I first joined the police, I had to declare the restaurant.
Yeah,
because you weren't allowed, right?
No, that's right.
And I wasn't married then, so it didn't really matter. But yeah, you weren't allowed to do anything like that. But now, and it had no conflict with policing.
No.
So, so I declared it, and then I carried on working. And more and more I was drawn here because the business was running and I was just coming in to check it. And I thought, what do I know about beauty? I know nothing about beauty. How am I going to run a salon?
Other than the fact that you won the prestigious Cathay Pacific 1984 pageant.
But I went back, but I didn't know anything about beauty treatments. And I went back to work on the Monday and I said to my sergeant, I'll work every weekend for the next year if you let me have Monday and Tuesday off. And they said, OK. So I went to college. So on a Monday and Tuesday, I went to college in Brentwood and did a beauty course in preparation to take this salon on. And I didn't have a day off for a year.
Karen.
I know. But it was pleasant. I mean, God, you walked in it and I'll never remember walking in there and the teacher goes, now, girls, you can imagine where I've just come from. You treat your nails like jewels and not tools. And I thought, what the hell are you talking about? And I go back into work the next day, into CID, and I said, girls, you treat your nails like jewels and not tools. And they all just looked at me.
Started laughing.
So I had the salon for about 9 months before I thought, right, now's the time. I gave him my notice, came out, and I thought, what have I done? I found I really struggled working in this industry after. It took me about 3 years to get used.
Did it really?
Yeah, it did. I still feel like a cop now, Paul. And I don't think that will ever go.
No, good.
And I don't want it to be honest. I feel like it in my head.
But you'll know when somebody walks in by instinct whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah, and, I think, the old saying, once a cop, always a cop. I think it's actually right.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
How can you get rid of that in your head? It's formed part of, nearly
our
20
life.
years
That's
of your life. So I took the salon on and learnt all the things. The girls who work for me now, at one time I had 10 of them, there's only 5 of us now, and they taught me things that I didn't know. Business side of it was easy for me, as I think would be for most police officers. They're very good at organising things. They're very good at the minute detail.
Yeah.
And I've had a few coppers come and, friends of mine come and say, I want to do this, what would you advise? Or I don't want to be a policeman. And I think, do you know how many skills you've got?
Yeah, I know.
It's crazy, isn't it? You've got so many skills that what we call a civvy life is easy.
Yeah, it is.
It is easy. You can do it with your eyes closed because you're so used to dealing with this.
But I think, and we spoke about this earlier on, I think if you've got the courage to do this, if I knew then what I know now, I would have set my own business up. But I didn't have the policing background to set my own business up. It's only after I left the police I realised actually I'd got all these skills, albeit I'd already made the plans. But you're absolutely right. But I think a lot of coppers become institutionalised and they keep their eye on the pension prize, which is now gone. In real terms, it's now gone. So we are seeing more people come to us for work. We've got people all over the world that are working, and we see more entrepreneurs that are taking the chance because the police service will have them back as long as they've got a good background. Yeah. So, but you're absolutely right. It's about utilising the skills that we've gained over those years.
To be honest with you, when my first husband died, I came out of the pension scheme because I couldn't afford to pay £400 to a childminder. And my starting salary in the police then was £13,000. Can you believe that? But I had this choice. I thought, I need to be part of society. I love my job. I'm staying in. I'll come out of the pension. So I was never tied by the pension. However, even today, my mindset was, I'm a smart girl. I've got a brain. I'm able-bodied. What's the worst that can go wrong? And I have that all through my life. I'll go and get a job. Yeah. It's... With my salon today, I was closed for a year. I expanded in 2018, so I've expanded the salon, gone into 2 buildings. My husband and I run the restaurant, obviously, and we've got the tattoo. So between us, we've got 4 businesses that were closed for a year.
Yeah.
And he said he got a bit fretful. And I said, we're smart people. When we started these, we were in our 20s with kids. We're now in our 50s with a brain and all this knowledge. So we just go and find work.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think if people thought more like that, if you're alive and kicking, what are you afraid of?
But you wouldn't have to find work because the fact is you're going to succeed. And I was telling you earlier on, when we go quiet, I go into a bit of a panic mode. It's like, oh, no. But the boss says, well, do you know what? This is all going to work.
Yeah.
This is all because we've got it to a point where it will work. Because you're a credible brand, we're a credible brand, and people like the likes of you and I because of our reliability, our customer focus, and we're quite demanding on the people that work around us, but we're also forgiving. We make sure that they have a great time working for us.
Yeah.
But we have got exacting standards, and you're exactly the same. And I admire you because when I started doing this, I've had a wish list, and I will thank you because I had a wish list of people I want to speak to, and you were on that top part of the list because, but you know what, you've done remarkable things. You've got fantastic businesses running, and you've stuck through it. And if you didn't, we said earlier on, if you don't like the heat in the kitchen, you get out. And if it's something that if you've done it all, the bits that you want to do in the police, then go and do something else.
Yeah, exactly.
If that's working for yourself or working for someone else, go and do it.
I've never needed a safety net, and because I think, do you know what, I'll find a job. I don't care if I needed the money to. Look at my dad. He came from a place he didn't speak a language. He got chucked into a country where he knew nothing and had to survive. And lots of people do that. So when people say to me, oh, what do I know? You know bloody loads.
Yeah.
Even if you've been a copper for God knows how long, you know loads. And your work ethics, what you have to do at a drop of a hat, all the inconvenience that we go through as cops, you do that. It's in you. So doing anything else is simple.
And the thing is, and I will say this, we meet wonderful people.
Yeah, we do.
Along the journey. And your true friends, the people that will turn out to the M25, you can count on one hand, but the amount of associates that you make through networking, if you've got that ability to use your brain and your tongue in the right level, your network that you can build within the police, that you can take with you once you've gone, is absolutely enormous.
Yeah.
But we had a mutual friend, Dilys, who I remember when she worked for you. She was working in the restaurant, wasn't she?
She was.
And God bless her. I mean, she passed away
8 years ago.
8 years ago. And if I hadn't been in the police, I wouldn't have met Dilys. I wouldn't have met Karen's. It's just, I think that I've been blessed with the great people that I've met. Anyway, Karen, before we conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to add, alter, take away?
No, thank you for letting me speak. I say these things and I think, bloody hell, woman, you've done a bit.
You have. But
it's only when you say it out loud, I suppose, because I think what you think is norm is not norm.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And what is normal? Joining the police service could be seen as being abnormal, but what is normal? But Karen, thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome. I'm enjoying your podcast, by the way. I've been listening to the other
have you? Thank you.
I have. Very nice.
Well, is there anyone you'd like me to reach out with? Because I'll be tagging this, and I know that you listen to the CEO.
I do, Diary of the CEO, because he's great.
Yeah.
But no, I'll have a think about it.
Yeah, and I'll tag him into this. And but thank you. Merry Christmas to you and your family. I hope it's a peaceful time for you, and I hope that the restaurant's particularly busy, which it will be.
Yeah, it will be.
And take care.
Thank you.